It's time for October the 19th. Thank you for being here today. You know, this program is set aside for you to ask your questions, give your comments on any topic whatsoever. And I, in my role as host of this program, will endeavor to answer your questions to the best of my ability using our Catholic faith, the Bible, tradition, the fathers, the medievals, the popes, the councils, the doctors, the saints, the catechisms, and just about anything I can find to help you walk away satisfied that your question has indeed been answered. We come to you every Wednesday from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time until that changes to Standard Time, and which is not too far away. And at the top of the program, I usually have some topics that I want to cover, but this time we have a special program. By popular request, we are going to cover the flat earth issue. Yes, that's still around and it needs to be dealt with because a lot of people fall for it. And we're going to try to get one of the experts here today who run a video of his. And then I will, excuse me, I will stop it intermittently to answer the points that he has made so that both sides are represented in this program. And of course, you can make your decision what you want to believe. And so, my producer, John, is going to run a video all the way through, hopefully. But as I said, we'll stop at different points. And he's going to run it at 1.5 speed so we can get through most of it. And if we don't get through most of it, we'll just have his program again and complete it. Which would be, oh yes, which reminds me, E. Michael Jones was supposed to be here next week, which is the 26th of October. I won't be here at that time. I have another engagement I can't get out of. So we have to postpone his final program on his new book, The Dangers of Beauty, to November the 2nd, Wednesday. So all of you E. Michael Jones fans, I know you're waiting with bated breath to have him back on again, but mark your calendars for November the 2nd, okay? And tonight we're going to get started with a flat earther. That's what we call them, flat earthers. They don't mind that. They don't take it in a derogatory sense. His name is Eric Dubay, and Eric has written a few books and made a lot of videos, and he's very passionate about his view of the flat earth, and he speaks very well, so you'll be able to understand him. And without further ado, John, let's start with Eric's video, and here he's going to cover 20 different topics. He gave us quite a list here, and as I said, I'm going to try to go through all of them. I'll go as fast as I can, but I don't want to go too fast. The first one he deals with here is common sense, something we wish we all had, never had to ask for, common sense. So let's take it away, John.
The following are 20 ways anyone can prove for themselves that Earth is a level, stationary plane. 1. Common sense. Stated or overemphasized. The most important thing to realize, and most obvious way to know you are not spinning on a ball, is your own common sense and lived experience. You have always, and will always, experience yourself as living right side up on a motionless Earth, with the sun, moon, and stars revolving over and around you. This is common sense, and what everyone in the world personally experiences every day of their lives. We are taught to believe otherwise, however, many things completely contrary to our own common sense and experience from a very early age. We are told that people living down under the spinning ball Earth in Australia are actually living upside down relative to those residing in the northern hemisphere, while an invisible force, strong enough to hold people, buildings, and oceans, stuck to the underside of a rapidly rotating ball, but weak enough to allow birds, bugs, and planes to take off and fly with ease, keeps Earth's atmosphere spinning in perfect balance and holds everyone firmly to the surface without crushing us. We can clearly see that the horizon is horizontal, but we are told it curves. We can feel that the Earth under our feet is motionless, but we are told it moves. We can observe the luminaries revolving around us, but we are told it is us that revolves. It is obvious that stars are stars, but we are told that stars are suns. We can see the sun is bigger than the stars, but we are told stars are bigger than the sun. We can see the sun and moon are the same size, but we are told the sun is 400 times larger. It is obvious that up is up and down is down, but we are told there is no such thing. As stated by flat earth author David Wardlaw Scott, with the modern astronomer, there is theoretically neither up nor down, though his experience belies his assertion every time he looks up to the heavens or down to the ground. Such aberration of intellect is really to be pitied. The 3rd century philosopher Lactantius was similarly perturbed about the idea, stating, "A sphere where people on the other side live with their feet above their heads, where rain, snow, and hail fall upwards, where trees and crops grow upside down, and the sky is lower than the ground? The ancient wonder of the hanging gardens of Babylon dwindle into nothing in comparison to the fields, seas, towns, and mountains that pagan philosophers believe to be hanging from the earth without support. Truly, the idea that people are standing, ships are sailing, and planes are flying upside down on certain parts of Earth, while others are tilted at 90 degrees and all other impossible angles, is utter absurdity and an affront to common sense. In fact, common sense is the first casualty of globe belief. No child or indoctrinated man would ever conclude or even conceive, if given to their own devices, based on their own personal observations, that Earth was a spinning ball revolving around the sun. When children are indoctrinated from a very early age to abandon their common sense and lived experience of a geocentric plain Earth in favor of this nonsensical, heliocentric globe model taught in schools, a schism occurs in their psyche. No longer can they trust their own senses and experience, and instead must trust information completely contrary to it, taught by supposed experts and authority figures who insist their version of reality is correct. When children see that every adult around them believes wholeheartedly in the spinning globe, and hear that only our ignorant, unscientific ancestors believed otherwise, they readily abandon the empirical evidence of their senses and adopt the prevailing nonsensical model. As stated by flat earth author E. Ashini, the one thing the fable of the revolving earth has done, it has shown the terrible power of a lie. A lie has the power to make a man a mental slave, so that he dares not back the evidence of his own senses, to deny the plain and obvious movement of the sun he sees before him. When he feels himself standing on an earth utterly devoid of motion, at the suggestion of someone else, he is prepared to accept that he is spinning furiously round. When he sees a bird flying and gaining over the ground, he is prepared to believe that the ground is really traveling a great number of times faster than the bird. And finally, in order to uphold the imagination of a madman, he is prepared to accuse his maker of forming him a sensiferous lie. 2.
All right, let's stop it there. Thank you, John. Okay, so a lot of the things he said we'll be covering because he deals with them in his other 19 points, so I'm not going to go over them now. But he does stress this idea of common sense. This is a double-edged sword for him, okay? Common sense cuts both ways because those who don't believe in the flat earth can use commonsensical arguments to argue against the flat earth. For example, when we look out at all these celestial objects, what shape are they? Do we see any that are flat? No, they're all round. Every single one of them, except perhaps asteroids, they which broke off from a planet, and we don't expect them to be round because they broke off in various kinds of pieces under various pressures. But all our celestial objects are round. So, I mean, if you're going to use common sense, let's use that argument. Why would we expect the Earth to be flat when everything else is round? And they're not round just because God liked the round shape. A sphere is a object that has the least amount of energy that is needed to hold an object together. Any other object, a rectangle, a square, even a triangle, is going to take more energy to keep that shape. And this gets back to one major issue with the flat earthers, and that is they don't believe in gravity. It's gravity that makes objects in the heavens round because it's going to be pulling on every point outside of the center of mass. And in order to conserve energy, it's not going to let some places be further than others unless it's forced to. And that's what gravity does. It's going to pull on all those points equilaterally and make it a sphere. We see the same thing when our faucet is leaking. We see drops form at the nozzle. Why is that? Well, it's because a sphere is the most economical shape that nature has can provide because it takes less energy. And so we see the water forming into a drop and then it has enough weight that it falls. But we see this everywhere. So again, if you're going to use the common sense argument, that's common sense. The things naturally go into a spherical shape unless there is some other force that's going to make them into another shape, square, circle, I'm sorry, square, triangle, trapezoid, whatever it is. Okay. Another common sense argument we could use is okay, so you believe the earth is flat. You look out at the stars and you see, the Big Dipper, you see Orion, you see Cassiopeia, you see everybody sees the same stars in the northern hemisphere. Okay. But now, if you go down to the southern hemisphere in South America, Australia, whatever, you see a whole different set of stars. Okay. And those stars are spread out into a certain proportion, very similarly to what they are spread out in the northern hemisphere. So Orion is, quite a distance from the Big Dipper, and Taurus the Bull is quite a distance from Orion, and so on and so on. So all those constellations have to fit into this hemisphere, and we all recognize them as northern hemisphere constellations. But that just begs the question, what is the flat earther going to do with all the constellations that are in the south, in the southern hemisphere on a globe Earth? And they're all different than the ones we have in the northern hemisphere. So the best he could do is put them on the lower rim of his dome that he thinks covers the flat earth. But that's just going to look absurd. Trying to squeeze all the southern hemisphere constellations into the bowl, the semi spherical bowl that he believes is covering the flat earth. Okay? So here's common sense for you. How do you fit those stars in there? Now, there's been a couple of guys who've tried to explain this, but their explanations are absurd. They're even worse than the idea of putting the stars up in the northern hemisphere. So, and I cover those in my book, by the way. And what I'll be doing as I go through Mr. Dubé's arguments is showing you the pages on my book that you can find these arguments, the rebuttals, that is. And the book, by the way, if you haven't seen it already, and I know there's a lot of glare here, it's called Flat Earth, Flat Wrong, an historical, biblical, and scientific analysis of the flat Earth thesis. And it's just a mere 750 pages for your bedtime reading. And anyway, I'll be giving you the pages for that. So my point here is that common sense covers both ways. He also talks about the father Lactantius. He is a early father from the 3rd century, and his problem, he was the only father who gave some credence to a flat earth. All the other fathers, and I have this all documented in my book, in one way or the other, all believed in a spherical earth. Okay. Now I know there's a group of Catholics out there that think that's blasphemy and all this stuff, and I've had some exchanges with them. But believe me, once you read the book, you'll see it because I cover the fathers in detail on this. But what Lactantius was worried about, he wasn't so much for the idea of a flat Earth. He was trying to protect what he thought was a Christian belief that men stood upright. Okay, because that's what the Psalms say. God made man upright. And he took that a little too literally. And the result was that he believed men had to have their head above their feet. And of course, that begs the question, well, how do you know what's up and down? And he assumed that, you know, as he stood on the earth, or well, that would be, where was he from? Somewhere, let me see, where was Lactantius from? Good question. Anyway, so he would be near the equator somewhere. So he'd be standing sideways. Okay. And he didn't like that idea. So he wanted man to stand upright. And the only way you could have that happen is if you had a flat earth and everybody was on the upper side of the flat earth, not on the lower side. So they would be upside down if they were on the lower side. And they called this the Antipodes, Antipodes. The pronunciation of that word kind of obscures it a little because if you were to be crude, you could say antipodes. Okay, antipodes. Anti is against, podes is feet in Greek. So you would say that the feet of the people that were upside down were in the wrong direction. Okay. And Lactantius didn't like that. So he gave credence to this idea that we could have a flat earth and everybody could stand upright. Okay. So now, of course, Eric doesn't deal with that. He doesn't explain why Lactantius believed that. And he doesn't explain that all the other fathers believed the earth was spherical. So sometimes he does this a lot. You know, he only gives one side of the issue, but we'll forgive him. So this whole idea, let's another commonsensical argument. We all know what an eclipse is. We have a solar eclipse when the moon is in front of the sun and the whole sun is obscured, and then the light of the sun doesn't come the normal way to the earth, and we see black in the sun, okay, for a few minutes. And then we also have a lunar eclipse when the earth comes between the sun and the moon. But when we see the results of a lunar eclipse on the moon, what do we see? We see the whole thing get dark. Okay. Now, that could only happen if the earth is spherical. If the earth is flat and the sunlight is coming and hitting the flat earth first, then what's going to appear on the moon? Well, it's not going to completely cover the moon. There's going to be what you would call a line or an oblong dark spot that goes across the moon. Okay. So that's common sense. You don't really have to be a genius to figure that out. That if the earth is flat, we're not going to see the same kind of eclipse we see when the moon comes in front of the sun. Okay. And that, of course, begs the question, how is the black spot that occurs when there's a total eclipse of the sun going to appear on a flat earth? Okay. On Earth, the Earth would be on a spherical Earth. The Earth would be big enough where you could actually see the spot of the Earth go across the spherical, the spot of the sun go across the spherical Earth. What's it going to be on a flat Earth? It's going to be a very long black spot, probably as long as it is wide, or even no, actually, much longer in length than it is in width on a flat earth because it has to cover that whole flat earth. So, you know, this whole thing about common sense, I wonder if Eric really thought this through. You know, they don't believe that Antarctica exists the way we believe it exists on a spherical Earth. The way we believe Antarctica exists, it's about the size of Australia, but it's at the South Pole. Okay. They don't believe that. They believe that there is no continent called Antarctica. And what it really is a 75,000 mile ice ring that lays flat on the outer edge of the flat Earth. Okay, so the question is, if that's the case, what how did all how do you account for the fact that we have all kinds of um, military and business institutions that are in Antarctica, and we have them all mapped out, and we know where they are and how long it takes to get from each one. If you had to travel from one mission place to another, how long it would take because we know how big Antarctica is. But on a 75,000 mile circumference ring, they're going to be 10 times farther away from each other if you could fit them on there. Okay. So again, common sense says no, it can't be a 75,000-mile ice ring around a disk. That's just absurd. Okay. So, and all the flights that go in and out of Antarctica every day, the tours that are given in Antarctica, they still go on week after week after week. And so people live there, they visit there, they know all about Antarctica. And nobody has ever understood it to be a 75,000-mile ice ring, but that's what you would have to believe if you're a flat earther. So again, here's common sense we're trying to use just on what? 4 or 5 items we just mentioned, okay? So, the common sense argument isn't as good as Eric pretends it to be. All right, so let's go on with this next topic.
Fake photographs. One of the main reasons the average person believes the world is a globe is because of the globular Earth images and video footage provided by NASA and other space agencies. Hundreds of such and thousands of videos featuring a globe Earth are freely available on the internet, yet most people never critically examine them with a skeptical eye. From the earliest photographs to the latest live streams, NASA and the world's other space agencies continue to be exposed for their Hollywood-style trickery. When consciously compared, contrasted, and investigated for inconsistencies, it turns out every single image and video showing a globular Earth has been manipulated in some way. All globe videos, for example, are achieved using either a fisheye lens to curve the horizon or created completely through CGI technology. One clear instance of the latter is NASA's 1990 time-lapse video of Earth supposedly filmed by their Galileo space telescope from 1.3 million miles away. This video features the Earth globe spinning in space, uncut for 25 hours, and shows the exact same clouds present without ever dissipating, changing shape or location the entire time. In reality, if you watch clouds in the sky for several minutes, 3 things will inevitably happen. The clouds will all move, some will morph, gradually changing shape, and others will dissipate and disappear completely. In NASA's official footage of the spinning ball Earth, however, the entire world's cloud cover doesn't dissipate, morph, or move for 25 hours, which is, of course, impossible, and proof of fakery. A good example of fisheye lens fakery is the famous 2012 GoPro Red Bull jump, where skydiver Felix Baumgartner was lifted to a record-breaking 128,000 feet in a stratospheric balloon, then jumped back to Earth. 7 GoPro cameras on the outside of the craft, and strapped to Felix himself, recorded the entire ascent and descent. Astute observers will notice that from ground level all the way up to the 24-mile apex, the horizon is significantly curved and remains equally so for the entire ascent. This is because the curve is artificial, and being caused by the GoPro camera's standard-issue fisheye lens. Once Felix reaches his peak altitude and the door of his craft opens, an inside camera mounted behind him without a fisheye lens reveals the truth, showing a perfectly flat horizon, still at eye level, 128,000 feet high. As for the hundreds of supposed photographs available of the globe, NASA readily admits that these are composite images and not actual photographs. They claim the composites are made by taking strips of data sent from satellites, spliced together in Photoshop, and colorized for the final creation. NASA's senior program analyst and lead data visualizer, Robert Simon, admitted in an interview that they are photoshopped because they have to be. When compared side by side and viewed with a discerning eye, the inconsistencies become obvious. The coloration of the land and oceans, and relative size of the continents drastically changes between images, and they often feature far too little landmass for 50% of a globe. Several of NASA's blue marble Earth images have repeat instances of exact cloud patterns clearly copied and pasted into place. Computer enhancements done on Earth images taken during the Apollo missions also show similar photo trickery. When hues are removed from the black backgrounds and brightness enhanced, distinct rectangular artifacts appear around the globe where they were pasted in, again proving them to be doctored composites. Furthermore, when NASA's Earth pictures are compared with those from the Russians, Chinese, and other space agencies, the differences become evident, and the fact that they are all Photoshop images becomes obvious. If NASA and the world space agencies could provide real, legitimate photographs and videos of a globe, they most certainly would. So the fact that they continue producing and pumping out nothing but fisheye fakery and CGI cartoons is strong evidence that Earth is not what they claim.
All right. So, talking about manipulation, Eric did a great job of manipulating the evidence to look in his favor. Um, First of all, let's say this. For all the fakery and the CGI and all the other things he complains about, it is a fact that the flat earthers have no photo, image, or anything close to it of a flat earth, okay, taken from space. Um, and a lot of them will don't even believe in satellites for that very reason, because they know that if satellites are real, then you could take a picture of the Earth if the satellite's far enough away. And like the ISS satellite, it's like 500 miles above the Earth. That's not far away enough. But if you took one, let's say where the weather satellites are, 22,000 miles up, that'd be a pretty good place to take a picture of the Earth. And they do it all the time, and they all come back spherical. But if the Earth was flat, we would get some indication that the Earth is not a sphere, that it's flat. It may not be able to fit on the whole camera lens, or it might be, bumpy here and there or whatever, but we're going to get something resembling a flat piece of land with water on it. And that's just a fact. Um, so yeah, that's why they deny satellite. There's even one guy, what's his name? Mark somebody. I talked to him about this, and he doesn't like to deny satellites. So what he'll say is that all the images that we're seeing were either painted or they are holographs or light projections somehow that make us believe that these are celestial objects up there, but they're not really, because he believes in the whole idea that we live under a dome, just like that movie, what, the Truman story. That's what he believes. So now there was another flat earther. His name was Rob Skiba. Now he died a couple of years ago of COVID when I had a debate with him, and he finally admitted to me that yeah, he does believe satellites exist. So I said, well, Rob, then come on, you got to understand that satellites, they may not take perfect pictures of the Earth, but they're going to take something that resembles a sphere. And he didn't know what to do with that. You could just tell he was befuddled, and maybe if he had more time to live, he might have changed his mind. I don't know. I thought he was coming pretty close. Others don't think so. But at any rate, let's deal with this CGI stuff. Yeah, NASA all the time uses CGI to give us pictures of the Earth, but that doesn't prove that the Earth is flat. The very reason they have to use CGI is because it's very hard to take a complete picture of the spherical Earth. It's big, and you have to have, most of their satellites are 500, maybe 1,000 feet above, I'm sorry, miles above the Earth. So they're not going to get a panoramic view of the Earth. And what happens is these satellites, let's say it's 500 miles above the Earth, the satellite will go around the Earth in a period of time, let's say 24 hours, 36 hours, 48 hours, whatever it is, and it will take snapshots of the Earth in the plane that it's traveling in. Okay. And then they will move the satellite over a few miles or so. And then it will have another orbit, and it will go around, and it will take pictures, numerous pictures of the Earth as it travels around. And then they will move it over again, and it will take more pictures. Okay. So by the time the satellite's done, it's gone over the whole Earth, but it certainly doesn't have one picture of a spherical Earth. So what they have to do is they have to splice these different pictures that were taken by the satellite as it went around and put them all together. Okay. And that's just the nature of a spherical object. It's very hard to put a sphere on a flat piece of paper called a picture and have everything proportionately work out as if you were looking at a sphere. It's actually impossible to do that. So they have to do a lot of splicing and cutting. And when they do that, they're going to get some overlaps. They're going to get some space that's not filled. They're going to have to fill it because they want it to look like a sphere. Okay. That's what you have to do. If you know anything about photography, especially celestial photography, that's what you have to do. And that's when he quoted the guy, he goes, "We do it because we have to do it." Well, he's not saying, you know, we're doing it to deceive the people and that's why we have to do it. We're doing it to try to get the most reasonable picture of this thing called Earth. And we can only do so by getting multiple pictures and splicing them all together and hopefully come out with the sphere that the Earth is. Okay. So that's why they do that. It's very expensive to send a sphere beyond 500 miles. And then the quality of the pictures are not going to be the same if you go more than 500 miles. So that's why most of them are at 500 miles. But we've had um, pictures taken of the Earth by the Russians and by the Japanese that have sent their satellites out far enough where they can get a picture of a spherical Earth. And they're in my book. Okay. They're there, they're not doctored, they are there, and you know, there's really nothing the flat earthers can say about it, especially since they have no pictures of a flat earth ever. Okay, whether they believe in satellites or not, they have no pictures. So talk about doctoring. I mean, if you have no pictures to prove your case, and then you criticize the way the other guy takes his pictures, and yet he explains to you why he does so, you're not being fair. Okay, so that's the problem with this whole thing. As far as the fisheye lens, yeah, it's going to make the Earth look curvical, but that doesn't prove the Earth is flat. It just means they use the fisheye lens. Okay, you can use other lenses that are not fisheye, and you're going to get a horizontal. Yes, you will, but that doesn't mean that the Earth is flat. It just means that the scope of your vision that this camera can occupy because of its width is only going to show you a horizontal screen. But if you had allowed that camera to get much bigger, you would see the Earth start to curve. But the flat earthers never show you that. They only show you fisheye lenses, and then they complain about that. And yeah, okay, you can complain about that. But there's other lenses that are not fisheye that are, give you a straight horizon, at least for the focal uh, length of the camera. Um, and you can't complain about those because you haven't seen the whole thing. And I cover that in detail in my book here. These photographs start on page 333 and following. And John, I don't know if you're able to bring up, because we were trying to get this prepared for the show tonight. And I was asking John if he's able to bring it up. John, if you ever did get the PDF of that, and maybe you could turn that to page 324 and 25, where I deal with this. Okay, so he can't bring them up, which is a shame. So you're going to have to buy the book, okay? And that is available for you at robertsongenis.org. You can go to also journeytothecenteroftheuniverse.com. It will be there. You can get it in PDF if you don't have enough money to buy the hardback or the paperback. But you have to see these pictures. They're like, you've all known what it is to peel a banana, right? So you start at the top and then you break it and then you peel it down, and what do you see? You see a peel. Okay. Well, that's what it's like taking pictures of the Earth sometimes, depending on where the satellite is. So you get all these peels of the circular or the spherical Earth, and you have to put them all together. And when you do, what you find out is they meet in the middle, but at the ends, they're far apart. Okay, so how are you going to fill in the gaps there? Well, you fill it in with water and clouds and all that. And sometimes when you do that, your clouds overlap. And so the flat earther's going to point to that and say, see, the clouds overlap or the clouds didn't change. And, that proves that the spherical earth is false. And no, it doesn't at all. Okay. All it shows is the difficulty of making a good picture of the spherical earth. Okay. What else did he deal with? I think that's enough. Let's go on to the next one, John. Number 3.
3. Water. The natural physics of water are that once contained and undisturbed, the surface will always remain horizontal. This fundamental property of water is why it has been used as a leveling tool by builders and engineers for millennia. Whether in a bucket, bathtub, pond, lake, or an ocean, the surface of water at rest always remains flat and doesn't have the ability to show convexity or any shape whatsoever upon its surface. This fact is easily demonstrable and empirically verifiable, but completely at odds with what we are told about the globe. For Earth to be globular and over 70% covered in water, the oceans must be somehow curving around and sticking to all sides of a rapidly spinning ball suspended in space. It is simply impossible to make water behave this way, as any can experiment for themselves. Bodies of water will not stick to the underside of a ball, and cannot show convexity or any other shape upon their surface. Globe defenders often point to water droplets, meniscus, surface tension, or adhesion, claiming these are examples of water bending or sticking to a surface, which is nothing but a fallacy of false equivalency, as these only happen at a very small scale, the size of a coffee cup. The claim is entire oceans wrapping around and sticking to the underside of a spinning ball, not a water droplet or the meniscus in a glass filled to the brim. NASA has also recently taken to faking CGI water balls using augmented virtual reality technology in an attempt to convince the public that water can behave this way. This kind of demonstration, done in a reference frame inaccessible to 99.99% of the population, however, is unrepeatable by the world's scientists and skeptics, and is therefore not scientific or permissible as proof of anything. First, they claim only massive objects the size of Earth have this attractive property. Then evidence, they show a phenomenon allegedly outside of our earthly reference frame. In other words, they are claiming bodies of water can bend around, stick to a ball, and show curvature upon their surface, but only at a scale too big for the public to recreate. Then they are claiming water can ball up and float suspended in air, but only in a reference frame too far for the public to recreate. As for water level, globe defenders have actually attempted to completely redefine the term level just to fit with their dogma. The true definition of level is a flat, horizontal plane, with no deviation in elevation along its surface. Water always reliably seeks and maintains its own level, and that is why it has been used in spirit levels and construction projects from time immemorial to create perfectly horizontal structures, no matter their size. Globe zealots, however, unsatisfied with this obvious truth and clear definition, have attempted to redefine level to instead mean curved. Their globe-friendly version of level means equal heights around a ball when measured from a central point. The fact of the matter is, however, that nobody has ever reached this hypothetical center point of the hypothetical Earth globe, so their redefined term cannot be tested or falsified. Until that day, rest assured there is good reason we call it sea level and not sea curve. 4.
All right. Okay. Again, a lot of manipulation of facts to, make your position look good. Um, I, let's just deal with this issue the best we can. You'll notice that Eric never says anything about the phenomenon of gravity. That's because they don't believe in gravity. Okay, so right away they have a strike against them that they never recover from. When NASA sends rockets into space, how many pounds of thrust do they have to get that sheen up in the air? You've seen it struggle. I mean, they have these burners that burn this fuel very fast, and they have to because of the weight of the rocket. They have to get to a certain point, and it's a struggle to get it off the surface of the Earth. Why is that? What's holding it back? That's what we call gravity. Okay. If I have this pen and I drop it, it falls because Something is forcing it to go down, and we call that gravity. Now, some of them have a whole thing that they do about buoyancy, and they claim that gravity is really an illusion, that it's really about buoyancy. And I cover that whole issue in my book. Actually, buoyancy wouldn't work unless you had gravity because it's totally dependent on gravity. I'm not going to get into explaining it now, but if you want to know the details of it, they are fully covered in my book. So if you don't have gravity in the mix, then you're going to be amazed at how water stays on the surface of the earth. Okay. Why doesn't it just fly up somewhere? Or how can, Eric says it curves itself around, and he doesn't know whether he wants to make an argument about the water having the ability to do that, because then he goes into how NASA can make spherical globs of water, and they show them floating in space, and this shows that water can bend and all this. And so he doesn't know which way to go in his argument, whether he's going to critique NASA for trying to make that look like it's an analogy of how water can um, oceans can cover the whole earth, or critique how the oceans cover the whole earth. He just doesn't know which way to go, and that's because he's confused. And he's confused because he doesn't understand gravity. That each massive body, has a force of gravity. We can measure it. We know what the escape velocity of the Earth is, for example. Going back to the NASA rocket, we know how much fuel, how much has to be burned in a given amount of time that's going to give enough thrust to lift that rocket up in the air. Okay, we can measure it. Why? Because we know what the escape velocity is of Earth. It's 32 feet per second per second, and um, we have to get above that in order to escape Earth's gravity. And on Jupiter, it would be a lot more because it's massive compared to the Earth. Okay, we have found that the more mass there is, the more gravity there is on the object. And even for the heliocentrists who believe that the Earth is spinning at 1,054 miles per second at the equator, that and it consequently forms centrifugal force, it's not enough to equal or even come close to the escape velocity due to the gravity of the Earth. And that's why the water stays there. Okay, so the only way that you're going to get that water to move substantially is like our tides. But what two bodies control the tides? They're bodies with massive gravity, the sun and the moon. Okay, that's how you get that body to move. So it's going to go up a couple of feet and down, depending on where the sun and the moon are. And so, yeah, that explains it. Since they're massive bodies, they would have enough gravity to pull that water and keep the Earth fixed. So, again, this is the real problem with their whole view of the Earth is they don't believe in it. They only believe in geometry. Like if you ask them, well, how does the sun go around? Because we see it going around. Well, they put the sun on the Tropic of Capricorn or the Tropic of Cancer, and they have it go around. Well, that just begs the question, what's making it go around? Okay. It's convenient for you to just put it on a flat Earth and say, well, this is the way it works in a flat Earth, but that's all geometry. What are the force laws that you are using that makes that sun move? And they say the moon is moving also. So what makes the moon move? What are the force laws? They have none. Okay. It's the whole problem with this flat Earth thing. It's just all geometry, and it's just it looks like it can work in some places, but that's true of a lot of things. You can make them look like they work in a few places, but all the other places they don't work. And when you're required to show the force laws that makes your system function, you know, they have nothing to say except to criticize, the idea of gravity, which, they're not going to win that argument. That is for sure. We have Newton's gravitational equation, F equals G times m1 times m2 over r squared. The G was measured by a what do they call it? The torsion balance. They can you stick a massive ball of iron on one end of a balance, and then you bring another object close to it, and you see if the ball on the torsion balance is going to move toward that other massive object that you brought close to it. And it does every time, all day, every day. And it does by the same force. Okay. So we know that even on small scales, we can demonstrate gravity. Okay. And on larger scales, we see it at work where it holds in all the water of the oceans, and they don't go floating out into outer space. Okay. So anyway, let's go on to the next one, John.
The horizon. The horizon is always perfectly horizontal, 360 degrees around the observer, regardless of altitude. If Earth was actually a globe, no matter how large, as an observer ascended, the horizon would remain fixed in position and fall below the observer the higher climbed. In reality, all amateur balloon, rocket, plane, and drone footage filmed without a fisheye lens at maximum altitudes of over 20 miles high show a completely flat horizon, still rising to eye level. Only in NASA and other space agency footage does the horizon ever curve or appear below the observer's eye level. In the heliocentric model, the horizon is claimed to be the physical curvature of their globe, and the reason boats receding from a shore-bound observer disappear from view. This was actually one of the original alleged globe-Earth proofs presented by Aristotle and still parroted by believers today. But by using modern zoom technology, we now know that the horizon is not the physical curvature of a globe, and those boats can be zoomed back into full view. This is because the horizon is not an objective physical phenomenon at all, but rather a subjective optical phenomenon based on an individual observer's perspective. If the horizon is actually the objective physical curvature of a globe, then objects receding beyond it could not be zoomed back into view, and it would remain fixed as an observer ascended. In reality, however, the horizon rises along with the observer, no matter how high, and modern zoom technology can bring objects receding beyond it back into full view. This proves the horizon line is not some objective point of curvature on a convex Earth, but rather the subject vanishing line of perspective from a given observer's point of view. Quoting Earth Not a Globe by Dr. Samuel Robotham, on the shore near Waterloo, a few miles to the north of Liverpool, a good telescope was fixed at an elevation of 6 feet above the water. It was directed to a large steamer, just leaving the River Mersey and sailing out to Dublin. Gradually, the masthead of the receding vessel came nearer to the horizon, until, at length, after more than 4 hours had elapsed, it disappeared. The ordinary rate of sailing of the Dublin steamers was fully 8 miles an hour, so that the vessel would be at least 32 miles distant when the masthead came to the horizon. The 6 feet of elevation of the telescope would require 3 miles to be deducted for convexity, which would leave 29 miles, the square of which, multiplied by 8 inches, gives 560 feet. Deducting 80 feet for the height of the main mast, and we find that, according to the doctrine of rotundity, the masthead of the outward-bound steamer should have been 480 feet below the horizon. Many other experiments of this kind have been made upon sea-going steamers, and always with results entirely incompatible with the theory that the Earth is a globe. 5. Gyroscopes.
Stop here. Okay, so I deal with this horizon issue on page 519, 609, 612, 616, 626, 633, 645. His argument is that as you see a ship move away from the shore and go out in the ocean, the ship, as we see it, gets smaller and smaller. We've all experienced that. And it reaches a point where, from our normal eyesight, that is unaided eyes, no telescopes, no binoculars, no nothing. At one point from our vision, normal vision, the ship is no longer able to be seen because it went too far out. And the normal way to understand that is it went beneath the horizon. First of all, let me say this. His whole idea that the horizon line rises with your rises to your eye level is false. Okay, that's one of his basic problems. The horizon is the ground. The only time that your eye is level with the horizon is when your eye is level with the ground. Any other time, your eye is above the horizon. Okay, that is covered in the book. You'll need to read that. But it's going back to these idea of ships. Now, his claim is okay. The ship really didn't disappear under the horizon because if you get a strong set of binoculars or a strong telescope and you focus it on the ship comes back into view. And so his conclusion is that the Earth isn't curved because you thought it was curved when your normal eyesight saw the ship go beneath the horizon. But the binoculars brought the ship back into view, so that proves that the Earth isn't curved, that the ship is still going on a flat surface of water, and the binoculars will bring it back into your vision. Wow. I've heard some whoppers in my life, but this one, it makes the top 10 at least. There will come a point, no matter how powerful your binoculars are, let's say they're very powerful, there's going to come a point where that ship on a let's just say it's on a flat Earth, and it's going out and out and out and out, 100 miles, 200 miles, 300 miles, 400 miles. Your binoculars aren't going to be able to see that ship. Okay, so the whole binocular argument that the binoculars bring the ship back into view and that proves that the Earth isn't curved is fallacious. Okay, it's all a matter of magnification. If your binoculars can magnify beyond your normal eyesight, well, of course it's going to bring the ship back into view. But it's not going to, but even then, it's not going to bring the whole ship back into view. It's just going to bring the top part of the ship back into view. Okay, because even for the binoculars, most of the ship is beneath the horizon. And but you can't see it with your normal eyes, the top of the ship, but a good pair of binoculars can see the top of the ship, and it's going to bring the top of the ship back into view. Okay, so it's just a matter of magnification. It has nothing to do with whether the Earth is flat or not. Okay, just the mere fact that with your normal eyesight, you are not going to be able to see that whole ship if it goes out, say 30 miles, 40 miles, 50 miles, means something is obscuring your view. Okay. And if you're only able to see half of the ship, the top half and not the bottom, something's obscuring your view. It's not just a matter of magnification, because if it was just a matter of magnification, you'd be able to see the whole ship when you brought the binoculars in. Okay, but you can't. So this whole idea about the horizon is for the birds. All right, let's go to the next one.
Gyroscopes are precision instruments consisting of a wheel mounted inside 2 or 3 gimbals, which provide pivoting support and allow the wheel to rotate about a single axis. As the entire contraption moves and shifts angles, the gimbals move and shift accordingly, but the inner wheel never changes its angle with respect to the reference frame. This unique property is called rigidity in space, meaning the wheel maintains its orientation and axis of rotation to space and not to the surface of the Earth. This means that the base of a gyroscope set in motion with its axis in a vertical position, then placed on a table for 6 hours, should rotate 90 degrees with the spinning globe. As the globe turns under the gyroscope for 6 hours, the axis should slowly turn from vertical to horizontal. This experiment has been tested many times with several full-length videos available online, and never does the gyroscope's vertical axis shift whatsoever. If the heliocentric model were true, not only would the gyroscope detect the alleged 1,000 mile per hour spin of the globe, but also the 67,000 mile per hour revolution around the sun, the entire solar system's 500,000 mile per hour spiral around the Milky Way galaxy, and the entire galaxy's multi-million mile per hour journey through the universe. Since these hypothetical motions never register on precision gyroscopes, it is clear that they, just like the spinning ball Earth they're based on, do not exist. Gyroscopes are also the technology behind inertial guidance systems and airplane artificial horizon indicators. When military jets are performing loops, barrel rolls, and other dogfighting maneuvers, the artificial horizon allows pilots to easily see their exact orientation relative to Earth without having to rely on looking out the window. If Earth was truly a sphere, by simply flying level, airplane artificial horizon indicators should show a steady decline unless pilots constantly correct their altitudes downwards so as not to fly straight off into so-called outer space. For example, a pilot traveling 500 miles per hour over a globe Earth 24,900 miles in circumference would have to descend an average of 2,777 feet, or over half a mile per minute. Otherwise, in 1 hour's time, the plane would be 31.5 miles higher than desired. In fact, if Earth was really a ball, there should be no reason to use rockets for flying into outer space, because simply flying an airplane straight at any altitude for long enough would already inevitably send you there. 6. Compasses.
All right.
The mariner's compass is another
Okay. So someone on the chat room made a comment about looking at Nikon cameras to do this, looking at ships going off the horizon. But that's what they use. They use Nikon 900s, the most powerful Nikon available. Okay. And they only see half the ship, the top of the ship. Okay. So that's already been taken into account. I know all the equipment that they use. It's all in the book if you want to read the details of it. Okay, on this idea of gyroscopes, he seems to have two different kinds of arguments here. Gyroscopes will work whether you have a flat Earth or a spherical Earth. Why? Because from the geocentric point of view, there are inertial forces in the universe, all over they permeate the universe. These inertial forces are demonstrated on a gyroscope. Okay, that's why the gyroscope, once it started spinning, the inertial forces generated by that gyroscope connect to the inertial forces that are in the universe. And that's why that gyroscope will stay in the same position. Once you started and you point it in a position, it'll stay in that position. Okay? Because the universal forces and the gyroscope forces that are generated locally in the gyroscope will match up and they will connect and they will stay in one direction. That can happen anywhere. It can happen in space with no planets. It can happen on the flat Earth, the spherical Earth, anywhere. It can happen on the sun, anywhere. Okay? It's just a principle of nature. So I don't know what this proves for him because we use it on a spherical Earth all the time. Now, the one argument he seems to have is that airplanes or jets are going to use gyroscopes for their measurement of how high they are and in which direction they need to go. Okay. Yeah, they do that all the time. Okay. He's trying to make it sound as if there is no gravity, and if the plane goes straight, well, and on a curved Earth, he's just going to go out into space. Well, no. See, this is where the gravity issue comes in again, because gravity is constantly pulling on that plane and is trying to pull it down. So if anything, the pilot has to program the computers, and they can do this very easily, to account for the gravity of the Earth and the altitude that he wants to maintain, let's say 35,000 feet. He can plug that into the computer. The computer will read the gyroscope and read the radar that tells him what the altitude is. It can compute it, and it will tell you how fast the plane has to go, whether it has to go up or down at a certain time or sideways. All of it is all calculated out. That's where they can put it on autopilot, because they take into account all these variable factors, and the computer reads them and adjusts the computer speed or whatever it has to adjust to keep the plane at a level altitude, 35,000 feet. No matter where it's going to go, it's going to go 35,000 feet. Okay. So I don't know what his argument is. uh, you plug these values into the computer, it calculates them out. I think what his problem is, he doesn't like the fact that um, somehow the plane has to keep adjusting so that it doesn't go flying off into space. But what's the big deal? They do this all the time. When you're moving, you better be able to calculate how fast you're going and where you are at any given time so that you don't crash into a mountain and that you land in the place that you wanted to land. You have to keep calculating it out. That's just the nature of the business. So I I don't know really what his point is with the gyroscopes. All right, let's go on to the next one, John.
Precision instrument, which can only work on a level plane Earth, and is an impossible and nonsensical tool for use on a globe. It simultaneously points north and south over a flat surface, and must be held flat to work, yet claims to be pinpointing two constantly moving geomagnetic poles at opposite ends of a spinning sphere originating from a hypothetical molten metal core. If compass needles were actually drawn to the north pole of a globe, the opposing south needle would actually be pointing up and off into outer space. Likewise, observers holding a compass in Antarctica would be at the bottom of the ball, so to show north, the needle would have to point down at their feet. If the so-called South Pole in Antarctica were truly the southern pole of a magnet, observers would be able to walk in a circle with their backs to the South Pole and have their compass needles show north being in front of them in every direction. This feat has never and will never be achieved because the so-called South Pole is simply an arbitrary point along the Antarctic ice marked with a red and white barbershop pole and topped with a little metal ball earth. The actual type of magnetism present on Earth is similar to a ring magnet found in loudspeakers, which have a central north pole with the opposite south pole being all points along the outer circumference. This perfectly describes the magnetism of our flat Earth, whereas the alleged source of magnetism in the globe model is emitted from a hypothetical molten magnetic core in the center of the ball, which they claim conveniently causes both poles to constantly move and thus forever evade independent verification at their two ceremonial poles. 7. Plain sailing.
All right, stop there.
Ship captains in navigating great distance.
Okay, so Eric seems to be oblivious to how magnets work. First of all, there are no monopole magnets. They don't exist. There are only dipole magnets. You have a north and a south pole. If you've ever seen a bar magnet and they put iron filings on the outside of it to show you how the magnetic waves are working, what you will get is, let's say, here's the magnet, okay, and the waves will shoot out like this, and they will go down. They will curve around and go down to the South Pole. Some of the ones that are closer will go here, and then they'll go here, and then they'll go here, and then sometimes they go really high and come out, and they'll do the same thing on the other side, okay? Come out really high, and then the closer you get to the magnet, the less the height is when it goes down. But that's how a magnet works. You get north going to south, south going to north, okay? So why do I illustrate it this way? Because you see how these are curved. So if you are here, okay, what's your compass going to do? Well, it's going to catch the magnetic flux that's coming down, and it's going to see that it came from this direction, so the needle's going to point north, okay? How can it pick it up even on a globe Earth? Let's say this is the globe. It's not a very good globe. But how is it going to pick it up if you're on the side of this globe? Well, because the magnetic flux goes in a curve. It doesn't go straight down and will miss your compass. It goes around in a curve. So it goes out many thousands of miles. And so the whole Earth basically is in a magnetic flux, where north is going to south, south is going to north. So your compass is going to catch that. You can't help but catch it. Even if it's 6 feet off the ground, it can catch it because the whole entire Earth is in a magnetic flux. So I don't know what his point is here. Okay, how does a compass? The reason he thinks there's a flat Earth is because he thinks the compass is only going to work on a flat Earth, and that's because he doesn't understand that magnetic flux goes out into a curve many thousands of miles from the Earth. Okay, and the whole thing is saturated with magnetism. That's what keeps us protected from the cosmic rays of the sun, especially. That magnet, if we didn't have it, we'd burn up like a French fry. So All right, let's go on to his next subject.
Distances at sea never need to factor the supposed curvature of the Earth into their calculations. Both plain sailing and great circle sailing, the most popular navigation methods, use plane, not spherical trigonometry, making all mathematical calculations on the assumption that the Earth is perfectly flat. If the Earth were in fact a sphere, such an errant assumption would lead to constantly glaring inaccuracy. Plain sailing has worked perfectly fine in both theory and practice for thousands of years, and plane trigonometry has time and again proven more accurate than spherical trigonometry in determining distances across the oceans. It is so commonly used at sea, Navigation in Theory and Practice states that, in practice, scarcely any other rules are used but those derived from plain sailing. The great and serious objection to plain sailing is that longitude cannot be found by it accurately, although in practice it is more frequently found by it than any other method. So both latitude and longitude are found most often and most accurately by assuming Earth to be flat, more accurately even than assuming the Earth to be spherical. Quoting 100 Proofs Earth is Not a Globe by William Carpenter, "If the Earth were a globe, a small model globe would be the very best, because the truest, thing for the navigator to take to sea with him. But such a thing as that is not known. With such a toy as a guide, the mariner would wreck his ship of a certainty. This is a proof that Earth is not a globe." 8.
All
Construction.
right, stop there. Okay, now you'll notice that he gave no examples of using plain, what he called plain sailing, that plane is plane, as in a flat plane. He gave no examples of people that have measured across the oceans, as he said, um, or anything even shorter than that. The one that he has used in the past is the Suez Canal. His claim is that since the Suez Canal has no locks, then in order to build the Suez Canal, um, you would have to dig down into the earth in the middle of the canal. Okay, so you have the canal and then you have the middle of the canal here. His claim is that in order to make this canal work on a curved earth, you would have to dig down over 1,600 feet to make the canal basically go through the earth to keep it flat. Okay, and we can prove that by the fact that it has no locks, so it can't hold water and build the canal one lock at a time, so to speak. Okay, now you can find this for yourself on the internet. You don't need me here. Go look up, flat Earth Suez Canal, and you're going to get dozens of people who know much more than I do about this stuff that can tell you, no, that doesn't prove that the Earth is flat. Here again, Eric makes the mistake that um, the water level means it has to be horizontal in order for it to be level. And that just isn't true. If you have for very short lengths, yes, like the what was that tool that he brought up there? The level with the water in it. We use that to because it has a bubble in there, and we can put that on a piece of wood, and we can get that wood to be as level as possible because the bubble goes into the middle of the level, and we know it's level. But those are on very short distances. On very long distances, it just doesn't work. Okay. And so I defy um, Eric to give us the examples. You are saying Carpenter said this, Robotham said this. Show us the examples of engineers who have measured long distances and have not taken into account the curvature of the Earth. I, on the other hand, will give you a dozen examples of where engineers say that they need to take into account the curvature of the Earth when they build a bridge, when they build something that is long in its construction. A tunnel, same thing. Okay. I give examples from the literature of engineers saying this, that that's what they have to do. And if they didn't take into account the curvature of the earth on long distances, they would never be able to build the bridge or the tunnel. Okay. So he can make all the claims he wants, But unless he has citations from the actual experts that do this for a living, it amounts to absolutely nothing. Okay. Let's take, for example, the uh, um, Verrazano Narrows Bridge that connects Brooklyn with Staten Island. It's a bridge that is a what do they call that bridge? The type of construction that they used. I forget the name of it. Anyway, it has two towers, and then the towers are connected by steel ropes, and then from the steel ropes they have smaller steel ropes holding up the road. I forget what they call that bridge, that construction. At any rate, the top of the towers are 1.41 inches further apart than the bottom of the towers. And why is that the case? Because in that length of space that bridge covers, the curvature of the earth is going to make the towers go out like this. Okay. And that's what's going to make them longer at a longer distance at the top than at the bottom of the towers. Okay. Because the earth is curving and it's going to spread them out, which makes sense. Okay. So we know that for a fact. It's not something we're making up. And, you know, at other, well, I think he covers this in his next topic. So let's go and look at that. Next topic there, John.
Surveyors, engineers, architects, and builders are never required to factor the supposed curvature of the Earth into their projects. Plumb bobs are used to establish plumb vertical datums, with spirit levels then used to establish horizontal datums and lay flat foundations across great expanses. If Earth was actually a globe of given proportions, builders would find themselves constantly deviating from both their established vertical and horizontal datum lines. But in reality, canals, railways, bridges, tunnels, and other large projects are always cut and laid horizontally, often over hundreds of miles, without any allowance for curvature, and no deviation from established datums. As stated by surveyor T. Westwood in Earth Review magazine, quote, "In leveling, I work from ordnance marks, or canal levels, to get the height above sea level. The puzzle to me used to be that over several miles, each level was and is treated throughout its whole length as the same level from end to end, not the least allowance being made for curvature. The Suez Canal, which connects the Mediterranean Sea with the Gulf of Suez on the Red Sea, is one clear proof of both the Earth's and water's non-convexity. The canal is 100 miles long and without any locks, so the water within is an uninterrupted continuation of the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. When it was constructed, the Earth's supposed curvature was not taken into account. It was dug along a horizontal datum line 26 feet below sea level, passing through several lakes from one sea to the other, with the datum line and the water's surface running perfectly parallel over the 100 miles. Another good example is the Dunyang-Kunshan Bridge, the longest bridge in the world, just over 102 miles long, which runs parallel to the Yangtze River and connects the Shanghai and Nanjing provinces. This bridge is approximately the same length as the Suez Canal, and was also built without factoring the alleged curvature of the Earth. If Earth was actually a globe 24,900 miles in circumference, spherical trigonometry dictates that the center of both the Suez Canal and the Dunyang-Kunshan Bridge would bulge over 1,666 feet higher than either end. Engineer W. Winkler was published in the Earth Review regarding the Earth's curvature, stating, "As an engineer of many years standing, I saw that this absurd allowance is only permitted in school books. No engineer would dream of allowing anything of the kind. I have projected many miles of railways and many more of canals, and the allowance has not even been thought of, much less allowed for. This allowance for curvature means this, that it is 8 inches for the first mile of a canal, and increasing at the ratio by the square of the distance in miles. Thus, a small navigable canal floats, say 30 miles long, will have, by the above rule, an allowance for curvature of 600 feet. Think of that, and then please credit engineers as not being quite such fools. Nothing of the sort is allowed. We no more think of allowing 600 feet for a line of 30 miles of railway or canal than of wasting our time trying to square the circle." Railroads are another example of large-scale construction projects spanning hundreds or even thousands of miles, working from an established datum line and without deviating for the entire length. The Manchester Ship Canal Company, in an official statement published in Earth Review magazine, confirmed, quote, "It is customary in railway and canal constructions for all levels to be referred to a datum which is nominally horizontal, and is so shown on all sections. It is not the practice in laying out public works to make allowances for the curvature of the Earth." As an example, the London and North Western Railway forms a straight line 180 miles long between London and Liverpool. The railroad's highest point, midway at Birmingham Station, is only 240 feet above sea level. But if Earth was actually a globe of given proportions, the 180-mile stretch of rail would form an arc with its center point at Birmingham raising over a mile, a full 5,400 feet above London and Liverpool. A surveyor and engineer of 30 years, published in the Birmingham Weekly Mercury, stated, "I am thoroughly acquainted with the theory and practice of civil engineering. However bigoted some of our professors may be in the theory of surveying according to the prescribed rules, yet it is well known amongst us that such theoretical measurements are incapable of any practical illustration. All our locomotives are designed to run on what may be regarded as true levels or flats. There are, of course, partial inclines or gradients here and there, but they are always accurately defined and must be carefully traversed. But anything approaching to 8 inches in the mile, increasing as the square of the distance, could not be worked by any engine that was ever yet constructed. Taking one station with another all over England and Scotland, it may be stated that all the platforms are on the same relative level. The distance between eastern and western coasts of England may be set down as 300 miles. If the prescribed curvature was indeed as represented, the central stations at Rugby or Warwick ought to be close upon 3 miles higher than a cord drawn from the two extremities. If such was the case, there is not a driver or stoker within the kingdom that would be found to take charge of the train. We can only laugh at those of your readers who seriously give us credit for such venturesome exploits as running trains round spherical curves. Horizontal curves on levels are dangerous enough. Vertical curves would be 1,000 times worse, and with our rolling stock constructed as at present, physically impossible." 9.
All right, stop it there. Okay, so several things to say here. Number one, you can build a bridge and a tunnel without taking into account the curvature of the Earth, depending on how you build the bridge and the tunnel. You can figure this is common sense. All you have to do is build the bridge or the tunnel in sections, and you just follow the path of the Earth. That's all you have to do. And you connect one section to the next section to the next section. You build it in sections, and then you put them all together. All you have to do is follow the curvature, follow the path of the Earth, and whether it's flat or curved, that's what your sections are going to follow. Okay, you don't know whether it's flat or curved in the 50 feet, 100 feet, 500 feet sections that you're making. All you know is you're making sections and connecting them one to the other. Okay, so that whole idea, they don't take into account the curvature of the Earth. Well, sometimes they don't have to. The only time you would have to take into account the curvature of the Earth is when you look at the end point that you want to reach, and you know what the beginning point is, and you know how many miles that is. Well, then you take into account that the curvature, whether you see it or not when you're building your bridge or your tunnel, is going to be such and such. That's all you know. So this whole idea that between Europe and England, it would in the middle it would have to be 3 miles high. No, it wouldn't. All it's doing is following the curvature of the Earth. And as a matter of fact, that's all you know. That's all you know. The only thing you can come back and do later is to say, by mathematics, is that this point between England and Europe would have to be on a curved Earth 3 miles higher than it would start out to be in Europe. Okay, but that's all math. It doesn't make any difference whether you understood that when you were building your bridge, because all you did was connect one section to the other, and you followed the path of the Earth. That's all you need to know. Okay, so this whole hullabaloo he's trying to create here, that first of all, again, he gave no citations to engineers except the surveyor. Now, what does a surveyor do? The surveyor is looking at very confined spaces when he's doing his surveying. He's not looking at miles and miles of distance. No surveyor does that. Okay, so he's just looking at a certain section, and of course he's not going to take into account the curvature of the Earth, because he doesn't need to, because he's in such a confined space. Okay, so oh boy. He does cover Lake Pontchartrain Causeway, and I covered that in detail in my book, and I have pictures of it, and I show you how they distort the pictures. They only take a certain section of the bridge, and before the bridge actually starts to curve with the Earth, they cut the photo off. Yeah, there's a little trickery involved here. So I show all that in the book. You can plainly see the Pontchartrain Causeway following the curvature of the Earth. They didn't have, and again, they didn't have to know that when they were building the Pontchartrain Causeway. They could just add one section to the next section to the next section, and before you know it, the bridge is done, and they wouldn't even know whether they were following the curvature of the Earth. They just laid the bridge. They made all the pillars the same height, put the road on, and that was all there was to it. Okay, so he's making something that's not something into something. All right, let's go to the next one.
Distance photography. We are consistently able to observe objects at incredibly long distances, far beyond what would be possible if Earth was actually a globe given proportions. By inputting the observer height and distance viewed into an Earth curvature calculator, it is easy to check how much a target should be obstructed on a globe Earth. For example, it is often possible to see the Chicago skyline from sea level, 60 miles away across Lake Michigan. In 2015, after photographer Joshua Nowicki photographed this phenomenon, several news channels quickly claimed his picture to be a superior mirage, an atmospheric anomaly caused by temperature inversion. While these certainly do occur, the skyline in question was facing right side up and clearly seen, unlike a hazy, illusory mirage, and on a ball Earth 24,900 miles in circumference should be a full 2,400 feet below the horizon. In Genoa, Italy, from only 70 feet above sea level, on clear days, it is possible to see the distant islands of Elba, Gorgona, Caprea, and Corsica, which are 81, 99, 102, and 125 miles away. If Earth was truly a globe of given proportions, all 4 islands could never be visible for such an observer, and would be hidden behind 3,300, 5,200, 5,600, and 8,700 feet of curved water. From Anchorage, Alaska, at an elevation of 102 feet, on clear days, both Mount Foraker and Mount McKinley can be seen in their entirety, standing straight from base to summit, with the naked eye, from 120 and 130 miles away, respectively. If Earth was really a ball of given circumference, both mountains should be leaning back away from the observer, with the lower half of each mountain completely obstructed from view. Based on verifiable curvature calculations, 7,719 feet of Mount Foraker's 17,400 foot summit and 9,220 feet of Mount McKinley's 20,320 foot summit should be hidden behind a giant bulge of curved globular Earth. The current record-breaking longest-distance zoom photograph recently captured Pic Gaspard from Pic de Finestrelles, a whopping 275 miles away, with an observer height of approximately 9,000 feet, from which, based on correct curvature calculations, the entire 12,740-foot mountain should be invisible behind nearly 6 miles of curved Earth. Even more recently, flat earthers like J. Tolan Media have been filming using infrared zoom cameras at high altitudes to capture lakes, mountains, and other landmarks up to an incredible 1,000 miles away. If Earth was really a globe the size we are told, many of the landmarks photographed would be hidden behind upwards of 70 miles of curved Earth. 10. Lighthouses.
All right, stop it there.
The distance.
All right, so this is one of the subjects that I cover at length in my book, probably over 50 pages. What I'll do here is I'll just pick one instance that he talked about, and that was seeing the Chicago skyline from Michigan. There's an amateur photographer named Joshua Nowicki who takes pictures of the Chicago skyline every year from the shore of Michigan. Now, Lake Michigan, from the shore of Michigan to the Chicago skyline, it varies depending on where you are, but let's say the average distance is about 60 miles. Okay. So in that 60 miles, you can calculate what the curvature of the Earth would be. Okay. So mathematically speaking, if you're looking on the Michigan shore westward toward the Chicago skyline at a distance of about 60, 70 miles, you should not be able to see the Chicago skyline. Okay. Now, of course, that depends on how high you are from the Michigan shore. But let's just say you're at 6 feet. You're 6 feet tall and you see from 6 feet vantage point. Now, Nowicki would usually get up higher. Okay, so we have to take that into account, but that's not going to really make a big difference. When he took his pictures in April, May, suddenly the Chicago skyline would appear. Now, not the whole skyline. He would get buildings that maybe he saw 3/4 of the buildings, but he would see a skyline. But mathematically speaking, you should not be able to see the skyline because the curvature of the Earth over 60 miles is enough where that skyline at Chicago should be below the horizon. Okay. So the question is, why are we seeing it? Now you'll notice that Eric doesn't tell us when these pictures were taken. Like where he had Joshua Nowicki as his first example, seeing the Chicago skyline. He doesn't tell you when the pictures were taken, and I'm talking about the time of year. And that is the crucial factor you need to know if you're going to do any type of scientific analysis on this. Because in April, as you know, the temperatures start to change. It's no longer winter. Now we're coming into spring. And what's going to happen is the air temperature is going to be a lot warmer than the water temperature. The water is going to take a while to catch up. And that won't happen until, say, June or so. So you're going to get what they call a lot of refraction of the light coming from the Chicago skyline to the Michigan shore because of the temperature difference. And you can calculate this out. If you know what the temperature difference is between the air and the water, you can calculate what the refraction is going to be. Now, when I say refraction, what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about light that normally goes in a straight line, okay? But if it's refracted, what's going to happen to it? It's going to bend, okay? So if you're looking over here from Michigan and you're looking at the Chicago skyline over here, okay, and the light is bent, what are you going to be able to see? You're going to be able to see. I'm trying to get this curve so it doesn't. It's hard to do this camera. You're going to see the Chicago skyline from Michigan over here because the light is the only way you can see it, and that light has been bent. It's not straight any longer. If it was straight, the Chicago skyline would be down here, okay? But now it's going to be curved, and so you're going to be able to see the Chicago skyline. That's what's occurring. And it would probably also occur in September, October, when the same thing happens, only in reverse, okay? But there's all kinds of atmospheric terms they put into this, not just mirage. There's lumina, and there's some other terms that they use. These are all in my book. You can see all the scientific analysis of it and know why it is happening, okay? The same thing with all the other examples he gave us. Most of them are over water, and he doesn't tell us what time of the year these pictures were taken. But if they're taken when the air and the water are at maximum different temperatures, you're going to get light refraction. And you're going to be able to see things you haven't been able to see before. But you see what they do with this? Without knowing what the scientific evidence is, they're going to conclude that the Earth is flat. And that's why you can see the Chicago skyline. So if anything, Eric's whole approach to this is he's already got it fixed in his mind that the Earth is flat. Now it's just a matter of trying to weave together disparate facts and put them in a nice delivery and a catalog of ideas, blank, 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 so that it looks attractive and everybody goes ooh and ah over that, and they don't have a clue of how to explain it, of course. And Eric doesn't give them the clue, because if he knew anything about the science of refracted light, he would have told them. He would have said, look, I may not believe this, but here's one possible explanation of why you see the Chicago skyline. And this is not like, this knowledge is not buried deep in libraries that you have to go dig it up. It's all over the internet. Okay? So it's not like Eric is oblivious to this. He knows it's out there, but he doesn't give it to the people as an alternative to the flat earth. because he's so fixated on the flat earth. And therefore, you don't give the other guy a chance to explain the other side of the story. That's being dishonest. Okay. And if you're going to be dishonest when you're giving a presentation, then you know what? The rest of the thing is not worth listening to because I know what you're all about. Okay. And this is a perfect example. Eric had every opportunity to explain to us why we see the Chicago skyline. And you'll notice that he doesn't say that it could occur in June or December. Yeah, because he doesn't even give us any time of year. But you can't see the Chicago skyline from Michigan in June and December. Okay, because there is no air refraction. That's why. Okay. Anyway, so let's go on to the next topic.
From which various lighthouse lights around the world are visible at sea, also far exceeds what can be found on a globe of given proportions. For example, the Dunkirk light in southern France, at an altitude of feet, is visible from a boat 10 feet above sea level, 28 miles away. Spherical trigonometry dictates that if Earth was a globe with the given curvature rate, this light should be hidden 190 feet below the horizon. The Port Nicholson light in New Zealand is 420 feet above sea level and visible from 35 miles away, where it should be 220 feet below the horizon. The Agero light in Norway is 154 feet above high water and visible from 28 statute miles, where it should be 230 feet below the horizon. The light at Madras on the Esplanade is 132 feet high and visible from 28 miles away, where it should be 250 feet below the line of sight. The Cordonian light on the west coast of France is 207 feet high and visible from 31 miles away, where it should be 280 feet below the line of sight. The light at Cape Bonavista, Newfoundland is 150 feet above sea level and visible at 35 miles, where it should be 491 feet below the horizon. The lighthouse steeple of St. Botolph's Parish Church in Boston is 290 feet tall and visible from over 40 miles away, where it should be hidden a full 800 feet below the horizon. The Isle of Wight lighthouse in England is 180 feet high and can be seen up to 42 miles away, a distance at which modern astronomers say the light should fall 996 feet below the line of sight. The Cape Legulas lighthouse in South Africa is 33 feet high, 238 feet above sea level, and can be seen for over 50 miles. If the world was a globe, this light would fall 1,400 feet below an observer's line of sight. And finally, the lighthouse at Port Said, Egypt, at an elevation of only 60 feet, has been seen an astonishing 58 miles away, where according to modern astronomy, it should be 2,182 feet below the line of sight.
All right, stop it there, please. Okay, so let's do a couple things here. One is they use this formula, and the formula is x equals 8y squared. That's where he's getting his 8 feet from. It's going to drop 8 feet every so often. And if you know your trigonometry, x equals 8y squared is the formula for a parabola. Okay. Now, but a spherical Earth is not a parabola. So why did they use the formula for a parabola? Do you know what a parabola is? A parabola is, it's like an arc. Okay, that's what you're going to get on the XY graph if you use the formula x equals 8y squared. You're going to get a parabola, but a parabola is not a sphere. Okay, so why do they use a parabola formula for a sphere? That's a good question. What will happen with the parabola, however, is that within about 30, 40 miles or so, it's going to equate with a spherical geometry. A parabola will, especially this formula they have. After that, after 40, 50, 60 miles, it starts to tail off. Okay. Now you'll notice that each of these these lighthouses, they're within that 30 to 50 mile range. So the reason he can say, well, you shouldn't be able to see this because it's this far away and it should be, 900 feet under the horizon is because he's using the x equals 8y squared parabolic formula. But that doesn't work. I mean, it's close within 30 miles. After that, it starts to tail off. So his figures are going to be wrong. All right. Number two, lighthouses are across what? Water. What did we just find out about water at Lake Michigan? That it competes with the temperature of the air, and if they're not equal, they're going to refract the light that comes from either side. Okay. So lighthouses are going to have the same issues. At certain times of the year, they're going to be able to see a lot farther than they would at other times of the year. Now, you'll notice that Eric doesn't tell you what times of the year he made or somebody else made these calculations. See, because that would stick a pin in their little balloon. So that's another issue. Third is the fact that within 30 miles, well, 30 miles is basically the limit that you can see with your naked eye in any which direction you look at. So let's say you're on the beach, you're looking out at the ocean, you see the horizon. Well, that horizon's about 30 miles away because that's as far basically as you can see. It's like a little cone that if you put yourself in any place in the world, you can only see in a 30-mile radius. Okay, that's it. So, um, not very much. And most of these lighthouses are within that 30 to 40-mile range, where that's all the little bubble that they can see in their little world, these lighthouses. Okay. So that's not a real big point, but I just wanted to make that available for you that you can't see very far. Okay. 30 miles, that's about it. So now, if what Eric was saying was true, that you should be able, these lighthouses, the light should be able to extend, um, it can be seen like 40 miles away and that's it. So his argument is that um, the light um, um, can't be seen more than 40 miles. Well, how does he know that? These lighthouses are very powerful lights. So if the earth was flat, you should be able to see these, 50, 60, 70 miles away. But you don't. But you see, Eric didn't answer that question. He knows these lighthouses are very powerful, and he criticizes the curve Earth view by saying you can't see them more than uh, uh, 40 miles away, and yet he doesn't explain why the flat Earth model can't see these lighthouses more than 40 or so miles away. And in the flat Earth model, that's where you should be able to see them because there's no curvature of the Earth blocking the light. So he's the one with the problem. Lighthouses should be able to be seen very far away. And they're only seen like 40 miles away in the curved Earth view because the Earth is getting in the way. Okay? Because it's curved. So it makes all the sense in the world why the lighthouses work as they do. Okay? And the reason I covered this 30-mile thing was because now that's if you're standing on the shore and you're like 6 feet tall and you're looking out, you can only see 30 miles. But if you're as tall as a lighthouse, you're going to be able to see 40, 50 miles out in that cone. Okay. And that's why all Eric's figures were around 40, 50 miles that this lighthouse is looking out and can see. Well, it makes perfect sense in a curved Earth because after 40, 50 miles, the curvature is going to take over and the light's not going to be able to bend, at least not in certain times of the year. Okay. But on a flat Earth, you shouldn't have that problem. Let me just reiterate again. That lighthouse light should be going for miles and miles and miles, way beyond what the curved Earth would stop at. So, all right, let's go to number 11.
11. Impossible atmosphere. If Earth was truly a globe constantly spinning eastwards at over 1,000 miles per hour, it stands to reason that helicopters and hot air balloons should be able to simply hover over the surface of the Earth and wait for their destinations to come to them. For example, during the Red Bull stratosphere dive, Felix Baumgartner, spending 3 hours ascending over New Mexico, should have landed 2,500 miles west into the Pacific Ocean, but instead actually landed a few dozen miles east of the takeoff point. Likewise, vertically fired cannonballs and other projectiles fall significantly due west on an eastward spinning ball. In actual fact, however, whenever this has been tested, vertically fired cannonballs shoot upwards an average of 14 seconds ascending, 14 seconds descending, and fall back to the ground no more than 2 feet away from the cannon, sometimes directly back into the muzzle. To account for this problem, globe defenders claim that gravity somehow magically and inexplicably drags the entire lower atmosphere of the Earth in perfect synchronization up to some undetermined height, where this progressively faster and faster spinning atmosphere gives way to the non-spinning, non-gravitized, non-atmosphere of supposed infinite vacuum space. NASA refuses to answer at what altitude this impossible feat allegedly happens, but the effect such a transition would have on a craft traversing it would be disastrous. It is also scientifically refuted by the simple fact that vacuums cannot exist connected to non-vacuums while maintaining the properties of a vacuum. As anyone who has punctured an aerosol can knows, 2 adjacent pressure systems, not separated by some kind of barrier or membrane, will equilibrate. If gravity magically dragged the atmosphere along with the spinning ball Earth, that would mean the atmosphere at the poles would be spinning at 0 miles per hour, while over the mid-latitudes it would be spinning around 500 miles per hour, and gradually faster until reaching the equator, where Earth and the atmosphere would be spinning together at over 1,000 miles per hour. Not only would this gravitized atmosphere increase speed from poles to the equator, but would also necessarily progressively increase speed the higher the altitude. In reality, however, the atmosphere at every point on Earth is equally unaffected by this alleged force, as it has never been measured and is proven non-existent by the ability of airplanes to fly unabated in any direction without experiencing any such atmospheric changes. Landing airplanes on such fast-moving runways, facing all manner of directions, north, south, east, west, and otherwise, would also be practically impossible. Not to mention rain, fireworks, birds, bugs, clouds, smoke, balloons, and projectiles would all behave very differently if the Earth and its atmosphere were constantly spinning. Tests were conducted in the 19th century with cannons facing each of the cardinal directions, which proved Earth and its atmosphere are not spinning. If they were, then north and south facing cannons would establish a control, while east firing cannonballs should fall significantly farther than all others, while west firing cannonballs should fall significantly closer. In actual fact, however, regardless of which direction cannons are fired, the distance covered is always the same. Common sense tells us if Earth and its atmosphere were constantly spinning eastwards over 1,000 miles per hour, this should somewhere, somehow, be seen, heard, felt, or measured by someone, yet no one in history has ever experienced this alleged eastward motion. Meanwhile, however, we can hear, feel, and experimentally measure even the slightest westward breeze. Furthermore, clouds, wind, and weather patterns casually and unpredictably meander every which way, with clouds often traveling in opposing directions at varying altitudes simultaneously. This is altogether incompatible with the theory of a rapidly rotating Earth and atmosphere. 12.
All right, stop it there. Okay, so again, Eric is working with missing facts in his analysis. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're in a boat, a little skip boat, and you bring a ball with you. And let's say the boat is going, I don't know, 20 miles an hour. Okay. And you're in the boat and you throw the ball up while the boat is going 20 miles an hour. What happens to the ball? The ball stays with you, doesn't it? The ball acts as if the boat's not even moving, and it goes straight up and straight down. You throw it up, and you put your hand underneath it, it's going to fall right into your hand. Okay. Let's increase the speed of the boat to 30 miles per hour. Now, let's say there's not enough wind to blow the ball. You're behind the windshield of the boat. You throw the ball up, what's going to happen? Same thing. You throw the ball up, it comes down straight into your hand. Okay. So, what does this tell you? First of all, it tells you that the speed that the boat is going is the same speed that the ball is going to be traveling, 30 miles per hour. So it's going to go with the boat. Okay. Even when you throw it up in the air, it's still going 30 miles per hour in that direction that the boat is going at the same time that it's going up in the air. Okay. So you have an initial speed to that ball that has to be taken into account. So the example of the helicopter, the helicopter that goes up, if the Earth is spinning, I'm not saying the Earth is spinning. I'm just using physics to try to explain why Eric's going off the track here. If the Earth was spinning, then the helicopter is going to go up and spin at the same rate the Earth is spinning. That's the initial speed of the helicopter. Eric's trying to make it sound like the helicopter somehow can defy the speed with which the Earth is going, and the helicopter can defy that speed and somehow go straight up without being moved by the initial speed of the Earth that it had when the helicopter was on the ground. Okay, so that's the first thing he gets wrong. The second thing is, okay, now you're still on the boat. What makes the ball come down? Gravity, right? Okay, because if there was no gravity, when you throw the ball up, it would still keep going up and up and up and never come down. So gravity is another force that has to be taken into account. So the ball basically has two forces on it. It has the 30 miles per hour that the boat is going, and from which you threw the ball up in the air, and now it has to contend with gravity. Okay, and that's a pretty strong force. So if that's the case, then you can't put your helicopter up and then wait for the Earth to turn under you until you land in the place that you want to land, as if you put the helicopter up in New York and you're waiting for San Francisco to come by and then you can land your helicopter. It doesn't work that way for the reasons I just explained. The helicopter is under two forces. It would be under the speed of the Earth, and it would be under the force of gravity. Okay, so Eric lives in some kind of dreamland. I don't know where he's getting this stuff, but it's not science. Okay, then he talked about his vacuum, the idea of the vacuum. And he said, it can't be the case that you would have an atmosphere and then you'd have this vacuum, because the vacuum would suck all the air out of the little atmosphere, and then there would be no air left for us to breathe. Yeah, well, if it worked that way, he would be correct, but it doesn't work that way. Okay, let's first take his example of the flat Earth. Where is his atmosphere? Okay. How is that atmosphere staying near the Earth? What's holding it there? What's stopping it from being dissipated out into outer space? He doesn't give us that kind of answer. Okay. Excuse me. Excuse me. Some flat earthers try to take care of that problem by saying that they live in a dome. Okay. So there's this glass dome or whatever dome they think it is. It's a hard dome. And the perimeter of that dome matches the flat surface of the Earth so that it's like a tight seal. Okay. Okay. Well, that's going to cause problems. All right. If you have a tight seal between a so-called dome of the Earth and the flat Earth, so that nothing can get in or out, and the reason they say this is because they want to preserve their atmosphere, because outside of the dome is the vacuum, and the vacuum is very powerful. We know how powerful vacuums are. Well, we got to protect ourselves from that vacuum, so we have a dome, so we can have air to breathe. Okay. But that causes a problem, because if you have a dome and you have no outlet to outer space, guess what's going to happen? Yeah, that sun is going to heat up your little dome, and it's going to start cooking every human being that's on the flat Earth. Okay, and nothing will survive, plants or animals or human beings. Okay, plus you have no escape for radioactive isotopes and anything else that the Earth wants to get rid of. It's always getting rid of hydrogen. It goes right out into the outer space. Having the dome is not going to protect you. And who knows? It's not even going to preserve your atmosphere because it's not going to be able to live in that kind of heat. Okay, you have to have currents that cool and heat up, constantly moving around in order to have an atmosphere in the first place. Okay. Um, the other thing is the vacuum of space is not what they think it is. Okay. There's been estimates from 10 to the minus 6 torr to 10 to the minus 17 torr for the vacuum of space. Okay. I show in my book how the atmosphere of the Earth is held to the Earth by its gravity up until about 100 miles or so. And that gravity, you can calculate it with everything else that's going on and equal a 10 to the minus 6 torr of vacuum space that works just in to balance it out, actually. Okay. But anything above 100 miles an hour, 100 miles from the surface of the Earth, that would not be the case. And that's where the vacuum starts. Okay. And it's easily calculated by mathematics from the facts that we know about atmospheric pressure, gravity, and how they all fit together. Okay. So, they can scare us and say, whoa, how are you going to deal with the vacuum of space? It'll suck all the, well, no, it won't suck all the air out. Okay. We can deal with it and it's easy to deal with. And he also apparently doesn't believe in the Coriolis force because he says, they shot these cannons and we can't tell that they go left or right or all this. No, that's just, you can prove the Coriolis force yourself. You can get on one of those little rides they have in playgrounds, spin around. You can sit on the edge of them. What are they called? Oh, and by the way, somebody said suspension bridge. Yeah, that's what I was forgetting. There are suspension bridges. Um, um, and let's say you had this thing goes around and you can have people sit on northeast, south, and west, and you throw a ball back and forth to each other. Okay. Now, without the little thing spinning, the ride spinning, you can throw the ball to the guy that's directly across from you, and the ball's not going to deviate. Okay. But if you start that little ride spinning, okay, and you try to throw the ball directly across to the guy that's from you while this thing is spinning, yeah, you ain't going to be able to do so. What's going to happen? It's going to veer off to the left. Okay. And that's because of the Coriolis force. Okay. So it's a real force that occurs in a rotating universe. And it also occurs mathematically in a heliocentric view where the Earth is spinning. Okay. And I don't want to get into that right now, but both views can explain it. But Eric doesn't believe in it. Okay. And all his evidence is very vague. So he did a bad job on that one. That is for sure. All right. Next one, number 12.
Flight times. If Earth and its atmosphere were constantly spinning eastwards over 1,000 miles per hour at the equator, then the average commercial airliner, traveling 500 miles per hour, should never be able to reach its eastward destinations before they come speeding up from behind. Likewise, westward destinations should be arrived at thrice the speed, but this is not the case. In reality, the differences between eastbound and westbound flight durations usually amount to a matter of minutes, and nothing near what would occur on a spinning globe. As Gabrielle Henriette stated in her book Heaven and Earth, if flying had been invented at the time of Copernicus, there is no doubt that he would have soon realized that his contention regarding the rotation of the Earth was wrong, on account of the relation existing between the speed of an aircraft and that of the Earth's rotation. If the Earth rotates, as it is said, at 1,000 miles an hour, and a plane flies in the same direction at only 500 miles, it is obvious that its place of destination will be farther removed every minute. On the other hand, if flying took place in the direction opposite to that of the rotation, a distance of 1,500 miles would be covered in 1 hour, instead of 500, since the speed of the rotation is to be added to that of the plane. It could also be pointed out that such a flying speed of 1,000 miles an hour, which is supposed to be that of the Earth's rotation, has recently been achieved, so that an aircraft flying at this rate in the same direction as that of the rotation could not cover any ground at all. It would remain suspended in midair over the spot from which it took off, since both speeds are equal. The spinning globe model dictates that Earth and its atmosphere would be moving together 1,000 miles per hour at the equator, and progressively slower, approaching zero closer to the poles. The following examples all take place at the mid-latitudes, where the globe model claims that Earth and its atmosphere should be moving together at approximately 500 miles per hour, the same as the average flight speed of a commercial airliner. flights from Los Angeles to New York City, traveling east with the alleged rotation of the Earth, take an average of 5.5 hours, for instance, so the return flight west should only take 2.75 hours. But in fact, the average New York City to LA flight actually takes upward of 6 hours, a time totally inconsistent with the spinning globe model. Flights eastward with the alleged spin of the Earth from Tokyo to Los Angeles take an average of 10.5 hours. Therefore, return flights westward against the alleged spin should take an average of 5.25 hours, but in actual fact, take an average of 11.5 hours. Another flight duration totally inconsistent with the globe model. Eastbound flights from New York to London take an average of 7 hours. Therefore, the westbound flights against the alleged spin should take an average of 3.5 hours, but in reality, they take an average of 7.5 hours. Eastward flights from Chicago to Boston with the alleged spin of the Earth take an average of 2.25 hours. Therefore, the return flights westward against the alleged spin should take an average of just over an hour, but in reality, they take an average of 2.75 hours. Flights eastward from Paris to Rome take an average of 2 hours. Therefore, the return flights westward against the alleged spin should take only 1 hour, but in actual fact, have an average flight duration of 2 hours and 10 minutes. All of these flight times are impossible on a 1,000-mile-per-hour eastward spinning ball, but are consistent with what would be expected over a stationary Earth.
Okay, this is a simple one. Now, though, as a geocentrist, we don't believe the Earth is rotating. If it was, okay, Eric's presentation is absolutely wrong because he does not take into account that the airplane, no matter whether it's on the ground or in the air, is in the envelope of the Earth's gravity, and there is no escape from it. Okay, so it's going to move with the Earth, whether it's in the air or on the ground. It doesn't make any difference. I already showed this by the example of us being in the boat and throwing up the ball. The ball is going to obey the forces that are around it. The one force being the speed of 30 miles an hour, the other force being the force of gravity. So I'm not going to get into any more of this issue with Eric on the flight times because he just doesn't understand gravity, doesn't believe in gravity. If you don't, then not only are you going to leave these things unexplained or pretend that you have an answer that's not true, you're not going to have any forces for your own system. They haven't explained what makes the stars go around, what makes the sun go around, what makes the moon go around. Nothing. They give no explanations whatsoever how these things work in dynamics, just in geometry. But geometry, as Galileo found out, doesn't explain a whole heck of a lot. All right, next one. John, flight pass.
13. Flight paths. If Earth was truly a ball, then there are several flights in the southern hemisphere which would have their quickest, straightest path over the Antarctic continent, such as Santiago, Chile, to Sydney, Australia. Instead of taking the shortest, quickest route in a straight line over Antarctica, however, all such flights detour all manner of directions away from Antarctica, instead claiming the temperatures are too cold for airplane travel. Considering the fact that there are plenty of flights to, from, and over Antarctica, and NASA claims to have technology keeping them in conditions far colder and far hotter than any experienced on Earth, such an excuse is clearly just an excuse, and these flights aren't made because they are impossible. If Earth was a ball and Antarctica was too cold to fly over, the only logical way to fly from Sydney to Santiago would be a straight shot over the Pacific, staying in the southern hemisphere the entire way. Refueling could be done in New Zealand or other southern hemisphere destinations along the way, if absolutely necessary. But in reality, Santiago to Sydney flights go into the northern hemisphere, making stopovers at LAX and other North American airports before continuing back down to the southern hemisphere. Such ridiculously wayward detours make no sense on the globe, but make perfect sense and form nearly straight lines when shown on a flat Earth map. On a globe, Johannesburg, South Africa to Perth, Australia should be a shot over the Indian Ocean, with convenient refueling possibilities on Mauritius or Madagascar. In actual practice, however, most Johannesburg to Perth flights curiously stop over either in Dubai, Hong Kong, or Malaysia, all of which make no sense on the ball model, but are completely understandable when mapped on a flat Earth. On a globe, Cape Town, South Africa to Buenos Aires, Argentina should be a straight shot over the Atlantic, following the same line of latitude across. But instead, every flight goes to connecting locations in the northern hemisphere first, stopping over anywhere from London to Turkey to Dubai. Once again, these make absolutely no sense on the ball model, but are completely understandable options when mapped on a flat Earth. On a globe, Santiago, Chile to Johannesburg, South Africa should be an easy flight, all taking place below the Tropic of Capricorn in the southern hemisphere. Yet every listed flight makes a curious refueling stop in Senegal near the Tropic of Cancer in the north hemisphere first. When mapped on a flat Earth, the reason why is clear to see, because Senegal is actually directly in a straight line path halfway between the two. On a globe, Johannesburg, South Africa to Sao Paulo, Brazil should be a quick, straight shot along the 25th southern latitude, but instead, nearly every flight makes a refueling stop at the 50th degree north latitude in London first. The only reason such ridiculous stopovers work in reality is because the Earth is not a spinning ball. 14. Latitude and
All right,
longitude.
up there. All right, this is another, shell game. The reason they don't have, the reason they stop in Dubai when they're going to New Zealand from Santiago, Chile, is because there are very few people that travel from Santiago, Chile to New Zealand. There's just not enough traffic. So what will happen is they get a direct flight to Dubai from Santiago, Chile. Then they have to get another flight from Dubai to New Zealand or Johannesburg, wherever they're going. So it's just a matter of convenience. It's not a matter of, well, let's stop in Dubai to refuel our plane. No, it's just a matter of economics. If there's not enough traffic for direct flights from South America to New Zealand, at least not enough for them to charter flights, the place that has the cheapest gas and a lot of freedom to fill your plane with gas would be Dubai, okay, and not India, for example. That would be hard to get your gas in India. Plus, it'd be very expensive. So you go to Dubai if you want to refuel. But then to get a direct flight from Dubai to New Zealand, you have to charter another flight. Okay, that's all there is to it. But Eric's trying to make it sound like they go out of their way because, you know, the Earth is actually flat and it's shorter that way. No, it has nothing to do with it at all. And I have a whole chapter on this in my book. I've talked to pilots. I've talked to engineers who map out these things from between the continents. All the information is there to show you how it all works and why Eric is blowing smoke and a lot of it. All right, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more to go. It's 10:10. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to get through them. So we're going to have to hold off on this until today is the 19th. I won't be here the 26th. Mike Jones is coming the 2nd, so we'll have to hold off until November 9th. And we will finish this little thing on Eric Dubay's 20 Reasons the Earth is Flat. So thank you for coming tonight. I hope I have helped you understand this just a little bit. If not, you know where to send your questions, and I'd be happy to help you. But, you know, you can't substitute reading the book yourself. It's in 3 sections: historical, biblical, and scientific. We were just dealing with the scientific issues tonight. And get a hold of that if you can at robertsongenis.org. And if you're interested in this topic. Okay, so thank you for being here tonight. Stop by robertsongenis.org and see our new articles that we have up. We've got 5 new articles on various topics, and we certainly do have a lot of books and DVDs for sale, so take advantage of that. And if you would be so kind as to leave a generous donation to help us keep going, that certainly would be appreciative, and appreciate your kindness, and God bless you for it. Until next time,